what we want to do to the organization from an in-state vision, what I would suggest is like the operating model, is wholly different than the tools that you use to get there, which is wholly different than the tools that you use to stay there, which is wholly different from how you create shared cognition across the organization. So bear with me here, okay? So can you imagine, right? So you're sitting in this talk with me, you have 45 minutes. Let's say you called my company and you said, hey, I heard you guys do agile transformation work, like what do you do? And I have 45 minutes to like explain to some C-level executive like all of this complexity, right? And they're just like, look, man, I just want the easy button, like how much does it cost, how long is it gonna take, like all these different things, right? So very often what I have to do in order to get people to suspend disbelief long enough to hear is I break those four things out very explicitly. And this is like this is kind of like the thing I want to talk about. So that third column, the system of delivery. If you look at anything that you're doing with Scrum, large-scale Scrum, SAFe, Nexus, like any of these methodologies that are happening, what they're doing is that they're describing a system of delivery. What is the operating model of this organization going to look like when we are done? Right? So SAFe describes what done looks like. Scrum defines what a Scrum team looks like. Large-scale Scrum defines what a large-scale Scrum organization looks like. The interesting thing about methodology, and I've been studying methodology for probably over 20 years at this point, nobody's just totally making stuff up and just going like, oh, that sounds really good, I'll just put it in a book, right? Everybody has a set of experiences that they're drawing from. If I go back and I think about like Dean Leffingwell's early work on SAFe, and I've been reading his stuff since he's been writing books, like he was a Rally guy, you may remember Rally, I don't even think that exists anymore, I guess it's CA or maybe it's, yeah, does it? Yeah, okay. What is that? Yeah, cool, awesome. I don't know. I used to work for version 1, so like I can't even keep up with who those guys are anymore. So I think they still exist, right? But I don't know, so. But anyway, so if you go back to like SAFe's early days, what they were basically doing is I think it was like Israel GAT and BMC and there's a bunch of different players that were going on during that world. And when Dean started writing his early revs of SAFe, what he was really doing was describing what they did successfully back at BMC, right? If you look at what like Henrik Nieberg does with like the Spotify model, like what he's doing is he's documenting what he did at Spotify during that time with that team. Okay, so every methodology has value, but the question you have to ask yourself when you get exposed to a methodology is what conditions must be true for that methodology to work. So you go back to the early, Ken Schwaber, Jeff Sutherland, and Mike Beadle work when they were describing Scrum. I guess it was at Patient Keeper or whatever some of those early case studies were. Right? They created a set of conditions under which Scrum worked. If you look at like Alistair Coburn's work and the research that he's done and the stuff he's written around Crystal Clear, there was like a way they structured team rooms. There was a way they interacted with the customers. There was a way they did all these things. And then they put methodology around it to kind of codify the practices. But there was an environment, an ecosystem that they were writing about. So the thing that we have to realize is that if we pick a methodology off the shelf, what we're doing is we're also signing up to create the conditions that were created for that methodology to work. There's nothing magic about what you learn in CSM training. The magic is, how do you form the team? How do you get a product owner with the capabilities to produce that kind of backlog? Right? How do you create the technical infrastructure and discipline to be able to deliver a truly working tested incremental product? Right? It's like a lot of things. There's a tremendous amount of truth. I just actually went and bought Ken Schwaber, Mike Beadle's book, the one with like the red, yellow, green. I think it's Agile Software Development with Scrum, because that was like one of the purest articulations of how Scrum works, right? From a process control perspective. Super, super brilliant work. But what starts to happen, right, is they have all this theoretical stuff. And then they go, oh, I can sell a 2-day certification and charge $1,200 for it and become a millionaire, right? And I'm not questioning their everyone wants to make a buck, right? But what starts to happen is then it goes mass market, and then people remember daily stand-up meetings, writing user stories, burn down charts, like all the things they prescribe, and they forget the conditions that were created in the room that made all that stuff work. So anytime you sign up for a system of delivery, a methodology, you're signing up to create the conditions that are required for that methodology to be effective. So that's one thing. So we have to know where we're going, what we want the behavioral characteristics of the system of delivery to look like, and we also have to understand what the underlying structure, governance, and metrics of that ecosystem and how they're going to behave. Okay, cool. So system of transformation, this was the first thing that we kind of split out. So if you hit any of our website stuff, way beyond 45-minute talk, we talk about this thing 4 quadrants, and we have expeditions to base camps, ways of slicing the organizations and bringing them to intermediate states. What you recognize is that to create the conditions necessary for that system of delivery to work, you can't flip a switch and do it overnight. We all know that we would love to take our legacy monoliths and put them in the cloud, right? Take from a tightly coupled legacy COBOL platform and have it be really nicely services oriented, right? Doesn't happen overnight. Even if you had the funding, even if you had the desire, even if you had the culture change, even if you had the leadership support, it's gonna take you years to actually do it, okay? So what do the intermediate states look like as you're changing the ecosystem to go from one operating model to another operating model? Can you describe those states? Can you say what it's gonna look like in 3 months or 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or 24 months? Can you lay out that roadmap of what that change is gonna look like? What are gonna be the baby steps every couple weeks or every couple months that are gonna help us measure progress? What are we gonna actually ask people to go do to affect that change, right? So what we've kind of learned, what was neat, it was a kind of a cool epiphany, is that we have clients that are doing all kinds of different methodologies, that have all kinds of ecosystems that they have to create. They're all based upon teams, backlogs, working tests, software structure, governance metrics, all that kind of stuff. But the patterns associated with setting intermediate milestones and doing the outcomes to actually get there and doing the work, highly repeatable. It's kind of cool, right? And so point one, right? The end state, the system of delivery, the ecosystem that you have to create to make the methodology work, you have to get there in a stepwise fashion. And one of the things I say in another one of the decks that I do is that agile transformation is incremental and iterative. Go figure, right? You do slices of the organization, and then you bring them to progressive levels of maturity as you learn, right? So if we think we're gonna do a big bang deployment of agile, it never successfully works that way. It never does. You gotta slice the organization up into chunks, and then you got to bring the chunks to progressive levels of functioning capability. So the unit of value of an agile transformation is an organization that has been transformed, right? So if you think about as you're building products incrementally and iteratively, you're not only adding major capabilities, but you're also refining the capabilities of the things you've already built. Right? That's what incremental and iterative development is, right? It's always working, it's always producing the product, it's always adding value, it's always available for sale, but it's constantly being added to and constantly being revised. Defining that as a system of transformation. Here's the other interesting, ironic thing. The idea that we're going to transform into an agile organization that stays static feels a little like an oxymoron to me, right? Because as markets and customers change, your systems and structures have to change. So your teaming strategies are going to evolve, your governance strategies are going to evolve, your business architecture is going to evolve, your technology architecture is going to evolve. So what you have to think about, and this is something that we've conceptualized, we haven't actually crossed the chasm with a client yet on it, is your agile transformation office, I think ultimately becomes like your office of the CIO, and becomes your continuous improvement office, right? So be mindful of that. The thing that got you there, because we get this a lot, right? Oh yeah, we already transformed. We don't have any more appetite for transformation. But you still have to change and evolve. Do you have the ability to change and evolve, to inspect and adapt your enterprise? Like there's starting to be patterns that emerge, right? And then the last bit, which is, I think, crazy tough. And again, you can imagine me sitting in a sales cycle, like trying to figure out how to explain this to somebody who's just overwhelmed, right? It's like a lot of times, even if I could get you to say, okay, I got the system of delivery stuff, Mike. I got the system of transformation stuff, Mike. Okay, I understand it's going to have to evolve over time, Mike. I got it. Like, how do I get people to agree to go? Right? And there's something in, we call it a system of engagement, probably a different thing if you're in a company, but we've had to develop patterns for creating shared cognition across the organization. Like, how do you teach an organization reference architecture and reference implementation, come up with a playbook, come up with a pattern, instantiate something, and then pull a thread through the organization, get a working instance of the organization at a level of maturity that everybody goes, yeah, that's pretty awesome, right? And then get them to take the next thread, and get them to take the next thread, and then to go, okay, I want to improve this thread. I want to break these dependencies. I want to do these things, right?